And what I'm looking for is stuff that can't be accessed via wheels. If a motorcycle can get there or a car can get there, there's going to be dudes there. Secondarily, I look to get off of a major trail conduit. So if there's a major trail conduit that goes into that area, okay, cool. People are going to be on that. But if I can get off a secondary trail conduit, especially abandoned trails, because don't forget, Forest Service is only maintaining now about 15% of the trails. So if I can get onto those abandoned trails, and I can find that out by just calling the Forest Service, hey, you guys keeping that one open? No, we haven't cut that one for 10 years. That's like ding, ding, ding for me. Because now I know horses can't get in there, llamas can't get in there. The only thing that get in there is goats.
Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast, episode number 286. Marc Warnke, the pack goats, sleeping on bucks and bulls. Support for the Big Buck Registry and the Deer Hunt Podcast comes from -33 merino wool layering system. Timeless natural insulation, keeping you warm on the coldest days while staying breathable and wicking away moisture on the wet ones. Grizzly Ears, the most advanced engineered wireless earbuds for the outdoors. Covert scouting cameras, remote cameras for hunting, wildlife, and security. And Big Buck merch. You can get cool, high-quality Big Buck t-shirts, long-sleeve t-shirch, and hoodies. And show support for this podcast by visiting BigBuckRegistryMerch.com. That's Big Buck Registry, MERCH.com. Big Buck Registry is a virtual museum of hunting stories. We preserve a piece of Americana by interviewing and recording hunters about their hunts and experiences from across the country. And who knows, maybe we'll learn a thing or two along the way that'll help us take our hunt to the next level.
Hi, this is John Stallone with Interviews with the Masters podcast. And when I'm not editing my own podcast, I'm listening to the Big Buck Registry with Jay Scott.
This is Zach Farnball with the Hunting Public, and you're about to listen to one of my favorite podcasts, Big Buck Registry.
Hey, this is Zach Sandow at Onyx Hunt, and you're listening to one of my personal favorite podcasts, the Big Buck Registry.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen and fellow predators. My name is Jay, and thank you for tuning in to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. For Dusty Phillips and Jim Keller and the entire staff here at the Big Buck Registry, welcome to this week's show. There are a couple things I'd like you to do for us if you could. If you would, please check us out on iTunes, subscribe, and leave us a review. With your help, we're going to try and push this show up the iTunes charts. I know we have a lot of listeners out there, and I need you to take some action. I need you to leave a review and subscribe to the show. If you do subscribe, that'll give you access and notification each and every week that a new show is released. You can also access this show in its entirety on YouTube, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, and as an Amazon Alexa skill. Go to Alexa and say, Alexa, enable Big Buck Registry. It's all right there for you to access on demand at your fingertips. Regarding the harness program, we have an ample supply of harnesses to give away from our volunteer donors. If you're in need of a full-body harness, please send an email to jay@bigbuckregistry.com. Marc Warnke says it's not so much about the hunting strategy, but it's the spot. That means hunting where hunters don't typically hunt. Sometimes hunting spots that haven't been hunted in over 20 years, and hunting where wheels can't go. This also means sleeping on bulls or bucks, which means that you're not coming out each day. And that means hauling in food and gear that one or two hunters couldn't possibly manage. So how? Well, Marc turned to pack goats to get to these remote areas with all the gear needed to hunt great spots for days on end. The rewards are priceless. We'll get to our entire interview with Marc Warnke in just one moment, but before we do, let's hear from our friends at -33 Merino Wool Products and Jim Keller with the Deer News. Let's talk about a hunter's layering system for a sec. We need to be ready for any weather that Mother Nature throws at us. With the layering concepts that -33 has created with their incredible merino wool products, they've got you covered. The -33's merino wool expedition weight garments will keep you warm on the coldest late season days while regulating and wicking away moisture in a way that only merino wool can do. You see, wool will absorb up to 30% of its weight in moisture. The without leaving you feeling wet or clammy, and wool insulates better than cotton or polyester and protects against hypothermia on those late season hunts. And here's another interesting point. You might not think of wool for early season, but with the minus 33 wicking technology, I'll take a lightweight minus 33 base layer any day in warm weather. Merino wool fibers naturally reject any bacteria found in moisture or sweat and gives you double protection against odor as your target buck approaches. Visit www.minus33.com to learn more about Minus 33's layering technology. Use the code BIGBUCK33 to get 10% off your next order.
Now here's Jim Keller with the Deer News.
Our first story this week. CDC warns hunters after man likely contracted tuberculosis from deer. This story is from the WGN9 website. With deer season just around the corner, the Centers for Disease Control are warning hunters about tuberculosis. Officials with the CDC issued the warning after learning that a man likely contracted tuberculosis after dressing a deer. In May of 2017, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services learned of a case of pulmonary tuberculosis caused by Mycobacterium bovis in a 77-year-old man. Officials learned that although the patient wasn't around anyone with tuberculosis, he had regularly hunted and field-dressed deer. Investigators learned that free-ranging deer in the area were often infected with M. bovis. As a result, researchers have found a few other cases where an animal infected with tuberculosis actually spread the disease to humans. However, they say it is understudied. Officials say the bacteria can be inhaled while the deer is field-dressed. To prevent exposure to M. bovis and other diseases, hunters are encouraged to use personal protective equipment while field-dressing deer, the CDC says. Hunter mistaken for deer shot, killed by friend in Glynn County, Georgia. This story is from the First Coast News website. A 17-year-old boy was shot and killed in Glynn County after being mistaken for a deer Saturday, according to police. Glynn County police arrived at a wooded area in the 500 block of Myers Hill Road in response to reports of a person shot. Once there, officers met with a group of hunters at Friendly Express on highways 82 and 303. Witnesses told police that all the parties involved knew each other and came from the Myers Hill area to go hunting, according to a police news release from police. During the hunt, Bobby Lane, 17, was in an area of heavy foliage and was mistaken for a deer, police said. Officers said he was shot by Hector Romero, 32. Romero helped take Lane to Friendly Express to an awaiting ambulance. Lane was later pronounced dead at a hospital, according to the news release. The Georgia Department of Natural Resources was called to investigate with Glynn County Police. The investigation is ongoing and no arrests were made. There is a GoFundMe that the family has set up in his honor. Grizzly bear attack on Montana hunter is fourth in 8 days. This story is from the USA Today website and was reported by Pete Thomas. A hunter was mauled by a grizzly bear Tuesday in the same Montana wilderness where 3 hunters were injured in 2 separate incidents. The unidentified male hunter, who is from Ohio, was treated for unspecified injuries and released from the hospital after being attacked in the Gravelly Mountains, according to Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. The encounter occurred between the Coal Creek Drainage and the Eureka Basin Road, 8 miles south of where the 3 hunters were attacked during 2 encounters 11 hours apart on September 16th. Those hunters, likewise, were hospitalized and released after receiving treatment for various injuries. A helicopter and ground search for the bear or bears responsible for those attacks was canceled on September 20th after no bears were located, according to the Billings Gazette. The hunter who was mauled Tuesday told FWP wardens and Madison County Sheriff's deputies that he was ambushed by the bear as he walked through fallen timber. He said he fired his weapon at the bear until it fled, then located other members of his hunting party and sought medical attention. The FWP and U.S. Forest Service launched an investigation and cautioned hunters, hikers, and campers to avoid the area until the investigation is complete. The FWP stated in a news release issued Wednesday that a search for the bear will continue through next week. Grizzly bears, a federally threatened species, are actively feeding in advance of winter hibernation at a time when various fall hunting seasons are underway. Most grizzly bear attacks on humans, FWP stated, occur after a surprise encounter at close range. That concludes this week's edition of the Big Buck Registry's Deer News. Special thanks to Daniel Applebaum and John Geis for leads on stories this week. For links to the stories featured this week, please check our show notes at www.bigbuckregistry.com. If you have any ideas for future topics or have any questions about any of these topics, please email me at jim@bigbuckregistry.com. For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News.
Well, thanks to Jim Keller for the Deer News. Without further ado, here is Marc Warnke. Marc Warnke, welcome to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, we're psyched to talk to you, man. It's, we, as the world does, we plug into social media, and you have to be one of the most interesting guys on the planet in the hunting industry.
Wow. Why do you say so?
Well, I don't know a lot of people hanging out with goats.
I don't know if that's necessarily a good way. That makes me a weird goat guy. I think you're being kind calling me interesting, but thank you.
I don't see anybody using goats in the manner that you do. And I know you're into hunting. You're a hunting consultant, and it's just a whole different spin. I mean, you talk to guys, they pack their own stuff in, or horses, but you are into goats, and you've got a website about packgoats, packgoats.com, and I want to get into all that because it seems to me that it's a very interesting story. It has to be. You're one of very few, I think, that are probably doing this. You know, obviously better than I do, of how many people in the world are using pack goats to get in and out of some rugged terrain. But I'm interested to hear your story. How did you start your career or interest in pack goats?
So, I'm almost 50. I've been a lifelong fitness guy. So, I collegiate football and baseball and always stayed really fit. Then in my 40s, I stayed fit by being active, hunting and fishing year round. I was really big into birds and into big game. And so for that part, when I turned 40, all of a sudden I started having knee issues, and I went into a doctor, and he said, he slapped me upside the face with this single statement. He said, you used to play sports to stay in shape. Now you got to stay in shape to play sports. And, that just really kicked me a good one because, if you took away my ability to be mobile, to be able to walk and stand and fish and hunt and bow hunt and draw a bow, those would all be grieving things for me. I would really struggle to know where my place is in the world if I wasn't a hunter and a fisherman, not professionally, but personally.
Yeah.
And so for me, when I then started having issues with carrying a pack, and this year I killed my 27th elk with my bow.
Wow.
Most of those were packed out on my back in my younger career, and I've probably helped, and I don't even know the number, so I'm just pulling this out of my butt. I've probably helped 25 to 40 other guys kill elk that I was hunting along with, right? When you're the guy that does the calling, you're always the guy doing the calling. Lots of times I'm killing my bulls because they backdoor me while I'm calling in a bull for a guy.
Right.
So in that way, I've packed out a lot of elk out of the backcountry of Idaho, and that's where I'm from. And 76% of our state is public land, so there's lots and lots of country to hunt. And what happened is that my family started to grow. My boys were starting to get old enough to want to go. My wife was at that time and I'm since divorced. That's why I say at that time. But my ex-wife was beginning to look at potentially going along because the kids were getting old enough. The problem was everybody was whining and sniveling about putting a backpack on and, covering the miles. And so I just looked for all the alternatives. I had lots of experience with horses and mules and done some packing, not with my own stock, but lots of other people's stock. I had some experience with llamas, and a guy mentioned that goats were a possibility. And I looked into them, and for me, both financially, the way my land sat, and my hunting style, goats, after all the investigation, was actually the perfect fit for me. But there were so few people doing it and so few online resources. I just had to kind of buy some goats and try it and figure it out. And, it was a trial by fire. So that was my motivation. That's kind of where I started. I started out with 4 goats, crap equipment, crap information, and just waded in and did what I do. I took it to the next level and figured it out, and invented all my own gear and built a website to help other people to do it. And it's just really been a labor of love.
Gotcha. When did you start doing this? What year? How far back are we going?
Not that far.
Okay.
So I think I'm on my 7th packing year now. So 2013-ish,
Okay.
I would guess.
All right.
Yeah, somewhere right in there.
So this is a relatively new venture for you.
Well, it is, and the amazing part is it's a relatively new venture in the world of human beings. I mean, as a pack animal in 1972 was the first time a pack was put on a goat in North America that we know of, and that was John Mayensinski going in to study bighorn sheep in the Wind Rivers, and a goat was the only animal that could go into the country with him. And so he cut a shovel handle in 4 pieces and then a 2x4 for sideboards, and that was the first crossbuck wired together.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of how that's the beginning. By the year 2000, there was maybe 10 people doing it, and by 2013, I think we had 40 or 50 in the country, which 80 to 90% of were 4-H people who were kind of packing their picnic baskets into a high lake maybe once a year. Nobody doing what we were doing. Nobody, I get between 500 and 1,000 trail miles a season, and we're packing out a lot of bulls and a lot of deer, and so all that stuff's brand new. Nobody knew how to keep them in shape. Nobody knew how to help them to create endurance. The breeding is still new technology. I mean, this is wild, wild west stuff still.
That's fascinating. So let's go back a little ways. So did you grow up in Idaho, or is this also a new location for you?
No, I grew up here. I think I'm 1 in 7 now in the state of Idaho that's an Idaho native. It's insane. Yeah, when I was a kid, there was no more roads in the state of Idaho than 2 lanes. Now we got 5 and 6 here in Boise. So, but yeah, I grew up in Idaho. I grew up in a hunting family, a very poor hunting family, where it was all about meat in the freezer. We didn't eat the horns, and it was our one family really trip that we could afford to do, because all it took is a tank of gas, and we were hunting public land. And my dad was farm labor, and my mom was a teacher, and so that was our family trip, was going deer hunting and elk hunting. We did 2 big trips a year, and And then when I turned in my early 20s, I kind of cut into my own. I figured out how to make money. I started hunting the planet really early. I think my first trip to Africa was when I was 25 or 26, and was hunting Canada and Alaska and all that stuff. I was, at 22, I quit drinking, and at 22 in one day, I became a hunting fanatic. I think I switched addictions.
Right. So that's interesting. So you're a native. What do you call yourself if you're from Idaho? Idahoan. So you're Idahoan, and you had to. I mean, you were hunting for sustenance. It sounds like this was early on, before you got into global hunting.
Well, yeah, because, an elk and a deer in the freezer made sure we had meat all year round, and we were poor enough that, we were pretty reliant on that. We really were. And again, back in the day, it was just a tank of gas and Grandpa's, 308 that we were using, and it was enough to make sure the freezer was full.
And away you went. Was the terrain you were hunting back then as rugged as the terrain you hunt today?
Yeah, we hunted an area that was kind of in the desert southwest of Idaho, and we definitely specialized in the one critter my dad knew decently, which was mule deer.
Okay.
But elk we dabbled with, we tried, just didn't know how to do that. He didn't know that hunting as well, and so we only killed a couple of those, but we always killed deer, and it was very prolific. But that was more canyon, high desert country, as opposed to the alpine that I spend a lot of time in today for chasing elk.
Okay, gotcha. So you said you were into fitness and early on sports. Where did that passion come from, as far as the sports and the goal or drive to be fit?
Sure. Honestly, the work side of being fit has something that I embraced later in life. I mean, I was always that kid that was just under the top player on my team, but I was always one of the top because I worked harder. I had a lot of grit. Will and determination is something that I think kind of came with me naturally. And so that gritty side of maintaining fitness, that pushing yourself to that edge of pain and that stuff, to truly be fit, that has to be an enjoyable experience for you. And for me, grinding it out and feeling like I just kicked the shit out of myself in a workout is a pleasurable experience. And it's the same in the backcountry. I mean, after day 7 of chasing bulls in high country, getting crappy nutrition, getting crappy sleep, and putting out 3 to 4,000 calories a day in effort, knowing my body is eating off itself to continue. You got to have grit, and there's got to be some pleasure on the other end of that. But there definitely needs to be an embrace the suck mentality that enjoys that component. I enjoy it less every year I get older. You offered me a backcountry hunt or a lodge-based hunt, I'd kind of have pause right now.
Yeah, right.
But before, honestly, if I didn't suffer, I wasn't hunting. And so I really put myself in those situations early and have always kind of enjoyed that. And that's changed. And the goats make it so I can have steak and eggs in the backcountry now. And I'm not carrying such heavy packs, and I can take people that are a broader range. I just used to not be able to hunt with just but a very few people who were willing to wade into the poo as deep as me.
Right. Gotcha. So what's your diet like if you have to burn that many calories on a regular hunt? I mean, instead of burning off of your body constantly, where it's actually causing you problems, how do you sustain that with a diet?
Well, that's a great question. And that's something that, at almost 50, and people can look me up on, if they search Marc Warnke or they search Pack Goats or they search Top End Adventures, any of my companies, they're going to be able to kind of see that profile prior to me. And part of the thing that I try to share with people is that at almost 50, I'm super lean and super muscular, and I'm muscular in a functional way. I'm not muscular in a look at my big muscles way, but I'm just super CrossFit fit.
Yeah.
And not that CrossFit is my cornerstone, because it isn't, because I think it's really difficult on a 50-year-old body to do those movements. But at the same time, for 50, I can get up the hill just about as good as anyone else and lift the things that they can lift in their 20s. And I used to be number 2 in the nation for years in a train to hunt competition that was a measure of the top bow hunter fitness level in the country, and I was up there. So I'm not saying I'm all that in a bag of potato chips, but it's been common for me to have people in my following say, well, how are you getting the results? So the answer to the question of how do I maintain my weight and my endurance during elk season is just fat. I take in enormous amounts of fat. I eat almost a brick of butter a day in the backcountry.
Interesting.
When I say a brick, that's 2 cubes.
Yeah.
So I'll eat almost a brick of butter a day, because the to eat, sometime you should just do this just as an experiment, but you should try to actually count calories and eat 4,000 calories in a day. And if you eat 4,000 calories, you'll realize, oh my God, that eating becomes a job.
Yeah.
You're going to have to eat all day long. You're going to have to eat early. You're going to have to eat late. You're going to be putting food in your mouth all day long, because you just can't put 4,000 calories of volume in your stomach in just a couple of sittings, right?
How many calories are in a brick of butter that you're eating?
I'm going to end up pulling that number out of my butt. So I don't know.
Okay.
A lot, though.
A lot.
Yeah, calorie density and fat and sugar are 2 of the most calorie dense. Fat processes slower than sugar. Sugar goes in and instantly forms glucose, where fat will go in and take a lot longer to emulsify and process. So I look at fat as my slow burning, I look at sugar as my fast burning, and then I look at my protein as how I just have I try to defocus my body off of sucking off my own musculature to maintain its weight, right?
Yep.
So what my daily intake it consists of is I actually have a video on my YouTube channel where people can see the diet that I eat on a daily basis when I'm elk hunting in the backcountry. And I take in pounds and pounds and pounds of bacon, pounds and pounds and pounds of butter, and I take in pounds, literally pounds of candy. And I eat Mountain House morning and evening, and I eat tons and tons and tons of nuts. And the reason I eat nuts is because they're very fat based, and I eat the fattiest of fat nuts I can, and I'm eating that and candy all day long. I mean,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Fascinating
So,
diet.
yeah.
Absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. Well, it's fun because I never give myself the freedom to eat carbs in the off season. So the month of September, I am like a freaking slap my vein carb junkie, man. Holy crap. That stuff's like crack.
Right, right. It sure is. I think the rest of the country would agree. It's just that most of them aren't burning the calories that you are.
Sure.
That's interesting.
Well, and I'm normally not, I mean, it takes so much to burn calories. I don't know if you've actually tracked, I mean, one of the best sweats in the gym is the stair climber. And I
Yep.
teach people to do HIIT training sessions on there and how to get yourself to burn calories for 18 hours to prepare for a hunt and do all that stuff. Because I'm putting guys that are desk jockeys on hunts all over the world regularly, and they always want to know how to prepare. So I have basically a thing on my site that tells you the diet in preparation, the diet during the hunt, and then your exercise regimen to get ready and what I do.
Yeah.
And part of that is the stair climber, because it's just one of the best ways to mimic mountain fitness in a gym.
Yeah.
And you can crush yourself there, but literally even crushing yourself there, you're lucky if you burn 300 calories.
Yeah.
You're lucky.
Yeah.
It takes a ton. It's
Yeah.
just way easier not to eat the calories than it is to burn them. I mean, the highest burn I do is in a girl class that I take. I lovingly call it my dance class. It's a Les Mills. It's called Body Attack. It's a pretty prolific exercise system that are in lots of gyms, and these, again, classes that 95% in there are women. But that class, Body Attack, is a bone crushing, oh my God. We burn between 800 and 1200 calories in 55 minutes. It's an ass kicker.
Wow. Okay. Well, it's funny you say that, because when I was younger, I was an exercise nut. I just couldn't get enough. It seemed like if I was going to go do anything, it was going to be exercise driven, whether it be playing basketball or baseball or going for a jog, or go for a 10-mile jog, play basketball all afternoon, and then go lift weights in the evening. That's what it was. Even doing all that, once I got to the stair climber, like I tried a stair climber once, and I said, you know what, this thing is really, really intense compared to some of the other stuff I'm doing.
It is.
And it became
so hard.
And I decided that if I were ever going to buy one piece of equipment for the house, it wouldn't be anything but a stair climber. So I actually own a stair climber, and it's the one thing I'll turn to in the dead of winter if I can't get outside to walk through deep snow because it's just too darn cold.
Sure.
Yes,
sure.
It's really fun to say that.
That's super cool. How much do you remember how much it cost?
I think back in it's a little older. It's an older unit, and I think back.
So is it the one with like the paddle steps, or is it the one with actually an escalating stair?
This is a paddle step type structure.
Okay, all right. I know what you're talking about then. Cool.
So
okay.
I think it ran a couple grand back when I bought it.
Okay. Well, they make that. The reason I ask is because it's one of the things, and your listeners may actually like this, because again, people want exacting details. People want to know how to do it like exactly. So I'll just tell them the HIIT training that I do that is so impactful, because it impacts you in two different ways on the stair climber. Number one is that when you can get 90% of effort for a minute and then 50% effort for a minute for 8 cycles, you put your body into a whole nother place, and it's a hack, and you actually will burn calories for 18 hours. You'll actually find that night when you're sleeping in bed next to your honey, she'll be like, man, you are stinking hot. And that's because you just fired up everything in your body to be at full tilt, and it takes a long time to cool down from that. So it's a really good way to teach your body how to burn calories for a long period of time. And it's that cycle. The other thing that it does is it increases your VO2 max, and VO2 max is all about recovery. So that guy that always can outclimb you, that's just kind of, I call it Everest walking.
Yep.
So he's just slow and methodical. There's lots of guys that hurry, 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 rest, breathe hard, breathe hard, breathe hard, hurry, 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 rest, breathe hard, breathe hard. Those guys are sweaty messes by the time they're at the top. The guy just slow, methodically climbing that never stops, he's not going to be a sweaty mess, and he's also going to sustain longer. But both of those require recovery, the ability to recover from effort, and that's VO2 max. That's your body's ability to process oxygen more efficiently than somebody who hasn't trained for it. And that stair climber routine that I do, it's not only crushing on a caloric level, it'll increase your VO2 max in a huge way. So the cycle is, again, I set, and for those of you at a gym, there's a 1 through 20 setting on all the stair climbers I've ever been on. At 20, you're running. You're running a stair climber. So it's piddle jogging. You're not running. But at 20, you're piddle jogging to stay up with it. And so I put it at 20 for 1 minute. Then I put it at 10 for 1 minute. And that's my 90% effort versus 50% effort. Now, when I started this, it was like 16 and 6, and it still crushed me. So you can progress. And I even have progressed when I'm at competition level. I do 90 seconds at 20 and then only 30 seconds to recover. And my goodness, is that the most painful thing I do. So that's kind of my system on the stair climber, and it really can accomplish some big things for a hunter that needs to be fit.
Gotcha. Very, very interesting. So let's go back to the goats a little bit. I'd like to know more about the goats. What are their personalities like? How well do you get to know these goats, and what are your interactions with them?
Sure. Well, that's the big. Oh my God, that was the revelation for me, and that's the revelation for every hairy gunter hunter who now gets a goat and then is like a little kitten taking selfies with it because he loves it so much. Goats are a better pet than a dog by 10 billion miles. And that's not because I'm a goat guy. I was a dog guy way before I was a goat guy. Since I was a little boy, I've owned hunting dogs. My first 12 years old, I got a Labrador, a shotgun, and Walt Walter's book called Gun Dog. And I trained my first Labrador, and I've never looked back. I've always had one. I love dogs. My dogs are now a pain in my ass comparatively to my goats. They're lower maintenance. They're just as loyal. They come when they're called. They love like almost too much. They're like that bucket with a hole in it. You can't give them enough love. They all come to greet you when you come out in the pasture, and they're totally fine without you till they see you the next day when you feed them. They are an incredible, incredible pet. And there's everything from that one that is standoffish to that one that's a pain in the butt in your hip pocket, wandering, following you around, leaning against you, wanting love, rubbing against you because he wants love. So, and then all my goats are horned, and they're huge. These are my Merciless, my most well-known goat. And bear in mind, your listeners can watch packgoats.com YouTube channel. You can go in and see all these videos. And then I even have a live feed where people from all over the world watch my goats in the pasture, and that's housed on Twitch. And if you just Google Pack Goats, you'll find it. But
no kidding. That's neat.
Yeah. So anyway, they're super duper loving. They do have different personalities. Some are mischievous. Some are aggressive with one another. There's a saying in the goat world that goats don't have goat friends, because they don't. They have somebody. Every goat kind of has one that he seems to hang out with, but then he's his buddy, but he beats his ass every day.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, goats, the way they communicate, there's only one goat not getting beat up in the pasture every day. If another goat is superior to that goat and he's at the feeder, they will full on tailgate blast them into a wall with no mercy to get them out of there. I mean,
no kidding.
They're tough animals because they beat the piss out of each other.
It's just an interesting dynamic that they seem to have, and just the way you described it.
Not only that, there's no chivalry. Even the girls and the babies. I mean, I've literally seen a 10-day-old little baby goat fly through the air because one of the adults threw it 15 feet through the air. No kidding.
Wow.
I mean,
Okay.
they just, and they'll blast a female. So it's really weird. And we leave the horns on because it helps them to cool themselves, helps them to defend themselves from dogs. People don't realize the number one killer of goats in your pasture is your neighbor's dog.
Really?
Yeah, like German Shepherds, Huskies, a lot of those breeds that are still fairly close to wild. You get a goat running away from them, they'll chase them down and kill them.
Okay.
So my goats, I have a couple that'll kick every dog's ass, and I'm glad they will. But that's a thing. The other thing that people don't realize about goats in the backcountry is that we don't tether them. They just follow us and stay around us out of like love and bonding. So we take away these babies while they're still wet, and we bottle feed them. They basically imprint and bond to us. So they think we're a goat, and they think they are a human. They think we're the same species, but we are a little weird in that we dole out love. So we're their alpha, we're their superior, but then we're these doles of love. And so it adds this extra level of bond that a goat will follow me through hell because he would be panic stricken to not be with me.
Gotcha.
And so even when we're at a base camp, they'll feed in the perimeter, and you don't have to pack their own food like you do for all other stock animals. They just forage like a mule deer. And so they'll be out and they'll be foraging, but they always kind of stay just within sight and just within sound. And if I yell goats, you'll hear their bells jingling as they're running in at full blast because they think I'm getting ready to go.
Yeah, wow. That's absolutely fascinating. I had no idea that they were that tight and that they could, just as a non-human species, adapt like that to a human. That's absolutely mesmerizing.
Yeah, it's cool. It's something fun to just be along with. People are really amazed. I mean, I take people on summer trips into the backcountry that normally would never do it, and I'm telling you, man, every one of them ends up with their favorite goat. They want me to take pictures of them with it. The goats are I keep getting overshadowed by the goats. They're the star of the show. I mean, Animal Planet wants to do a show on us, and the main focus is just on the goats themselves because, it's the longest domesticated animal, almost 14 years based on fossil records that we've been coexisting with goats. The weird part is the rest of the world drinks goat milk and eats goat's meat.
Right.
We're the only country in the world that forgot what an amazing counterpart or companion or, a gift from God, if you want to call that goats are to humanity. And the Americans are the only ones that have forgotten.
Right.
And so I'm trying to be kind of part of that movement to say things like, well, why is it that municipalities will allow a predator that can bite people in their backyard, but not a goat?
Right.
That seems ridiculous.
It is kind of interesting. Huh.
Yeah. So anyway.
So and one of the questions I did have was about predation. You're in some wild country, and I was wondering, how do they protect themselves, or is it a problem beyond the neighbor's dog?
Yeah, really, really common question and good one. The answer is that, yeah, they can be predated. Their ability, just like a mule deer buck, to fend off a cougar is nil to none, right?
Yep.
So what we do is we keep them close. They're always within sight, and they won't let us really get out of sight. And at nighttime, when they're most vulnerable, we put them on a HOTLINE. So they're all tied up at night. Now, you don't need to. They'll sleep around you, and they'd be even in your tent. But the goal is that if a predator does come into camp, I'm armed, and I'll be able to get up and defend them as long as they didn't run off in the dark.
Okay.
So we tie them up at night so that we can defend them. But that being said, I live in Idaho. We have wolves, bears, cougars. We have it all. I've seen all those tracks around my camp multiple times. I've never had an interaction with one in thousands of trail miles. I've never had an issue.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting.
So it's not a common thing.
Right. Gotcha. How many goats are you working with at a time?
So currently I have 18 goats. It's one of the things people don't realize about goats is they live a dog's life. Like other ungulates, it's their teeth that kill them. When their teeth wear out, they can't digest and chew their cud. And goats are especially unique in their ability to process food, but it's reliant on chewing. A goat actually can take in food and it won't come out as poop till 6 days later. Wow. So that's why goats can make a living off of things that other animals can't, is because they have such an adept digestive tract and they chew their food so much. But in that same time frame, they only live a dog's life at 12 to 13 years and they can't pack full loads till 3 or 4.
Okay.
So basically you have this 4 to 10 window where you need babies coming up and you need old dudes going out, and you need kind of a cycle of goats coming through your string.
Yep.
And so I can pack out a bull with 4 goats fully boned. I only really need 2 with mule deer, but I take people into the backcountry. I just took the head of PR for Remington and then an author for the NRI magazine on a 16-mile in backcountry hunt, and we ran 9 packers on that just to make sure everybody could make the trip and they were really lightly loaded.
Gotcha. Okay. What is it that you pack in? What are the goats carrying?
Food, mostly.
Food.
When you pack in good high grade food, it's easily 60 to 70% of your load. Yeah. So
Gotcha.
Of course, tents and tarps and, in my backcountry camps, you have the luxury of a chair, which if you've spent any time in the backcountry, there's nothing like a chafed ass from sitting on logs and rocks.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah.
We got real amenities. We have real food. We camp in larger tents. We have better sleeping bags. We're just above the backpacking community, but we're below the horse community that literally packs in folding tables and craziness like that and wall tents. But I pack in canvas teepees. I mean, I have a 9-person teepee. My goats will pack, pretty easily if I really don't have a long ways to go. I have lots of goats that can carry 70 all day long.
Wow. Okay. So that's a fair amount of weight that they can carry in.
Mm-hmm.
And if you carry 70 pounds in addition to hiking in serious terrain all day, that's going to wear you down pretty good. So
for sure. Yeah, for sure. So I go in empty. They carry everything.
Okay. So that being said, so if you're using the goats to get into deeper country, does it enhance the hunting? And this is kind of the perspective that we're coming from, being a hunting podcast. How does that enhance your hunting abilities?
So in 2 ways. Number one is there's kind of a reasonable gap that I've defined and paid attention to from 30 years in the backcountry. Most hunters stop at 2 miles. Mm-hmm. Some will make it to 4 in a backpack. If you're really not super bright, especially in the elk world, you'll go to 6. As soon as you do that once, you will never do that again if you pack out bulls, right?
Okay.
On your back. So where I tried to get access to is from 4 to 10 miles, because over 10 miles becomes really long on goats as well. And I gauge everything off of elk. You can add more mileage and you can add different stuff based on deer, mule deer, or any of the other mountain species, goat, sheep, that sort of thing. But what goats do is 2 things. Number one is they let me get better food and better amenities and the ability to pack out game deeper in the backcountry. And they are the only stock animal that can get into the country I can get into. Llamas and mules do not have a flying chance in Hades of getting into the country I can. If you go and you look at my Instagram account and past videos and some of the stuff that my goats actually jump, climb, crawl under, crawl over, it's incredible what these guys can do. If they can't go around it, under or over it, then neither can I.
Okay.
I mean, it's so they can get anywhere. So they can get the places motorcycles can't get, horses can't get, mules can't get, and llamas can't get. And because of that, I'm accessing country that even humans can't get. Like I was the first one to be in that drainage that I hunted this year, just now with those Remington guys. I was the first one that had been in that drainage in almost 20 years. So literally bulls were dying of old age. Deer were dying of old age. That still exists.
Wow. That's insane. To think that goats can go that much further than any of those other animals and that you can get into places where elk are dying of old age. That's insane. Wow.
I know, right?
That is
Yeah.
absolutely amazing. Do you find any limitations with the goats?
Yeah. So, one of the things that you're limited by is sheer weight, right? So, for example, I have to bone out every animal I put on them because even if my guys can carry 70, they can only carry 35 per side.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
The other thing that's really a pain in the ass with goats is their short packer life. I mean, if you think about it, it's expensive to raise a goat from 0 to 4. And if he ends up turning out to a piece of crap, you just lost all of that.
Right.
So, when you only can pack a pack animal for 6 years that you can count on versus a horse for almost 20, that's a whole different ballgame. You only need to pick out a couple of good horses and mules in your life to have what you're going to use. Man, I'm cycling through goats all the time.
Okay.
So that part of it's kind of a pain. It's nice that I can haul them in the back of my truck. That's another advantage of goats.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that they can only do 35 pounds a side again is a limit. There's not a lot of ton of limits except for they can't pack as much weight. And I do find that horses have an ability to do longer duration. So they can pack in 20 plus miles, where for me, I just can't. It's too far, too long. And at the same time, one of the largest disadvantages of a goat is that you can't ride them, right?
Right.
Another one is you can't leave them in camp. So you always have to hunt with your goats. Your goats cannot be left alone.
Right.
Number one, because you need to protect them. And number two, because if they do get chased off and they do get away, they are one of the easiest animals to go feral. And so now you will have your goat hanging out with wild populations, and that just is irresponsible as a pack goat owner. So we never leave our goats anywhere unattended. But I did want to mention that as well, though. Hunting along with the goats for me is an advantage because now I have 5 little 4-legged horned animals walking around me that put the game species at ease. It's incredible.
Right. Yeah, I can see how that would help. Yeah, because you don't usually hunt with another animal unless it's you're bird hunting.
Correct.
It's pretty unusual, or you're hunting with some kind of a predator. If you're chasing down, you're hunting with a dog. That's really. But to hunt with an animal that is not a predator, is usually a prey animal. Man, I bet that does change their demeanor, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. You'll see bulls come in and actually relax. You'll see antelope run in because they see them as a competitor. And I've snuck amongst my goats into bow range on mule deer a lot. It's just hooves and horns trust hooves and horns. They just do.
Yeah. Boy, that's an interesting concept all in itself, isn't it? Just to, let's get a goat and just go have it hang out while you wait for the deer to show up.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. It's an interesting, it's an interesting thing to pay attention to see how the animals react. And I've done enough of it now where, I call it, they're loud, they move, they're hard to kind of keep doing. I've literally missed shot opportunities because I couldn't get a goat out of the way before.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So there are some disadvantages being able to hear well when you have 5 other things moving around you, trying to be quiet, moving in. There are some things that you give up, but there are also enough advantages where I would consider it like a 60-40 split. I'm more advantageous to have them with me than without me,
Gotcha.
Especially on elk setups. I miss them when they're not there because they're always raking and chewing and eating. And when a bull comes in and when you've called him in and he comes in and there's nothing happening and all of a sudden the woods are dead silent, he gets nervous.
Yeah.
But if he sees an animal moving around and it's got 4 legs and it looks horned and it's kind of brown, okay, cool, man, it's a party. What's happening?
Yeah.
Now I know why there was noise over here.
Right. Yeah. The calm right down. I can totally see that. Mm-hmm. Very interesting. So you've got the goat life going on, but you've also done some consulting and hunting in other parts of the world. Let's go back to when you first did your first international hunt. You said that I think you were 27. Is that what you had mentioned?
Well, that was Africa. I think I did Canada at like 24, 25. I've always been good at making money. I was raised super poor. But I've always been good at speaking and making money with my mouth, either through sales or and I've never had a job before, so I've always owned my own company. But at the same time, and when you're that young and you prioritize hunting and you don't spend money on girls and booze and you're doing it, I was always like playing alone, right? I was, I was traveling to different places in the world, and one of the great ways to get to know a culture, because I was so interested in cultures around the world, was to sit across the campfire with somebody. I always when I would tour and be a tourist, I always felt like people were never genuine. I couldn't really get to genuinely know them. But when you hunt with somebody for 5 days, you know how they speak about their wife, you know how they talk about their children, you know what they love, what they don't love. I mean, you just get to know somebody. And I really loved that part of international hunting, and it's still the reason I go. I'm actually not a very big trophy guy at all. I don't have that many mounts. I mean, I feel it's disrespectful to leave their horns. In fact, but I do. I mean, if I don't want to pack out a set of elk horns because I shot a raghorn and it's just an extra thing to pack out that's pokey, I leave it.
Yeah.
So I'm not into that side of it. I love shooting big deer, and I love knowing what they score and all that stuff. But the taxidermy side, the trophy side, has never really meant a ton to me. It's more about the adventure and the bugs and the birds and fooling a really smart critter and all that stuff. It's way more to do with that. So for me, that's just started from the get-go. And once I got hooked by that bug, I basically, because I was good at making money, I took 6 months off a year for almost 15 years. And that's all I did is bow hunt the world.
Wow.
And I grew one hell of a photo album, but I never had any money in the bank. As soon as I ran out, I went back to work. I was like a bow hunting bum. And so once that stage ended, I got married and all that stuff. I decided to, actually, I retired early in life, 2008 and 2009, flipped me back upside down. I literally watched my net worth crumble. And I had to start over again. And I started over by founding a company that's pretty well known in the hunt consulting industry, and that I've since sold out, and I have my own firm now. But I've been doing it for a long time. And hunt consulting is something that people don't understand very well. So I'll just quickly explain it.
Yeah.
I am the guy that you call that's done it, did it, been there. I work with about 120 outfitters globally, and pretty much any species you want to chase in the world, I have at least 3 options in at least 3 different places in the world, depending on species. But because of that, I get the value to know who to trust and who I have relationships. And my clients, they don't pay any more to book through me. They pay the same amount if they found that outfitter on their own. I actually get paid on the back end as a referral fee from the outfitter, as kind of seen like a cost of marketing. They don't want to be on the phone. They don't want to have big websites. They don't want to go to sportsman shows. So they seek out people like me, and I bring just a regular clientele base. And my clients appreciate me because now they don't have to go on the internet and play the guessing game where 90% of guys are going to tell them they're the greatest thing since sliced bread. And the reality is about 25% of outfitters globally are really good at what they do. And that's who I work with.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that's kind of how all that works.
Gotcha. All right. So you've got a global education. You've been there. You've done that. You now know where to go and who's good, who's not good. And by doing so, you can get paid from the referral to whatever outfitter it is. Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, the volume is generally I'm booking about 1 million to 1.5 million hunts a year with my clients. I mean, I have clients that literally have $100,000 a year hunting budgets, and I have clients that the biggest hunt they can afford is a DIY elk hunt or a hog hunt in Texas. So right. I don't discriminate. I help everybody.
Yeah.
But yeah, if guys are looking for an axis hunt in Texas, I have that. And if they're looking for a moose in Alaska, I got that. And if they're looking for, whatever they're looking for in Kazakhstan, if they're looking for a Marco Polo, I have that.
Gotcha. All right. Very good to know. And I think, we'll have the gamut of listeners in this show, from the DIYers up to I'm sure there's some guys and gals that are listening that are probably on the higher end of the budget. So hopefully they'll hit you up at some point if that is something that they need. That's a neat job. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, no worries. It's what pays the bills. Pack goats is my passion business that I enjoy, and
Yep.
it's fun. But also too, people can call and just ask questions, because lots of times I'm just being helpful in general with tag draws or Western application. Find somebody that can pack them in and drop them off. I mean, it's the full gamut. I just always pick up the phone and I always call back.
Very nice. Very cool. If we could talk about just some of your deer hunting strategies and techniques, being a professional in that aspect of hunting. You got to be good. You got to really know your stuff. How do you approach a mule deer hunt, for example, with the goats, and what are the things that you're looking for to actually have a successful hunt?
Well, yeah. So there's really, and I'm gonna take your question is, how do I kill a big buck? Because how do I kill a buck is pretty simple.
Okay.
But how do I kill a big buck is what everybody's trying to figure out, right? And
Right.
there's different answers for that. I've killed 4 mule deer over 200. I've killed probably 20 over 180, but that's in 30 years of trying, right?
Yes.
And those, luckily, I live in a state that has a ton of public land, and we still have drainages where animals are dying of old age, and I got goats. So, I've been that guy that's been willing to get into the backcountry. So a number of my really big deer, I'll talk about that strategy in the backcountry and what I do there. But the other one is tag draws. If you draw a good tag or hunt on a private ranch that holds those deer, then that gives you a chance as well. And unfortunately, it seems like the hunting community, especially the side that is more on the DIY side, on the side of backcountry like me, has a judgment of the guys that do it the other way, like they did it that they're somehow less than. And what's really unfortunate is that hunters as a whole seem to be okay with eating one another publicly down to their bloody nub.
Right.
And I really want to have you and your listeners understand that this is a passionate subject of mine. We're only 7% of the population. Licensed hunters are now 7% and falling. And if we don't convince the other 93% that we're good dudes, we're going to lose our right to hunt. And so I just want to say to all of us, please, let's not eat our own young. Let's not eat our own kind. Let's support each other as long as it's legal and ethical. And actually, when somebody does break the law, scathe them non-publicly. We don't want to point out the jackass and give him more press.
Right.
We want to celebrate the right guys that do it right on a consistent level, and that's almost all of us. So there's my little soapbox thing, number one. But number two, to speak to, killing big deer, it can be done by just drawing a really good tag in a premier area. A lot of those areas aren't hard to kill a big deer. It's just hard to draw a tag, or paying for good access on good land with a good outfitter.
Gotcha.
But to do it after it, and I can help you with those other two, do it when we're doing it on our own, is all about getting in places where bucks have the genetics and the area to reach age class. And remember, there just aren't a lot of deer that can get over 200 without good genetics. I mean, that's an uncommon deer. Now, I do believe that almost all mule deer populations in North America can reach the upper end deer if he's allowed age class to get into that 170 and 180 range. And I'm talking Boone and Crockett scoring and all that different stuff. So,
Right.
70 to 180 deer, most mule deer can get there. But as soon as we start talking 190, 200 plus, that's probably, I don't actually know the number, but I would guess that's only about 25 to maybe 40% of mule deer range have the capability to even get there genetically or nutritionally, right? So then you need to find those areas that can produce that if that's your goal, and you're going to know based on statistics on, just a call to the fish and game in those areas and find out if those deer genetically can reach those ranges or nutritionally. If they can, now it's about finding an area where they're going to get a chance to get age class. I actually have a deer that I sent in his teeth that I killed in the eastern plains of Colorado. He scores 208 and he's a 3.5-year-old deer. Okay. So that's not just a guess. I sent in his teeth. The rating on the teeth, they actually score how accurate they think they were, and it was like a AA, like as high as their accuracy. So I legit have a mule deer buck that grew 208 inches as a 3-year-old. So
wow.
So that can happen, but you're really in most areas looking to try to kill deer that are 5 to 7 years old. And if you can kill that 5 to 7-year-old mule deer and he's in good genetics, he's going to be that 185 plus category most likely.
Okay.
So how do I get there? I just do more than 95% of hunters are willing to do, and I access country that most aren't willing to access. Now, mule deer, the blessing of them is that I can go in longer on a backpack hunt and bone out a mule deer and get his meat and horns out without crushing myself. Elk, completely different equation. But learning how to bone in the field will be a critical component to getting in deeper to get the meat and everything out. The other component is just being able to do the map research. I literally spend time on Google Earth and on all the different map platforms. I like Hill Map. That's a really good one. I also like Onyx. And what I'm looking for is stuff that can't be accessed via wheels. If a motorcycle can get there or a car can get there, there's going to be dudes there. Secondarily, I look to get off of a major trail conduit. So if there's a major trail conduit that goes into that area, okay, cool. People are going to be on that. But if I can get off a secondary trail conduit, especially abandoned trails, because don't forget, Forest Service is only maintaining now about 15% of the trails. So if I can get onto those abandoned trails, and I can find that out by just calling the Forest Service, hey, you guys keeping that one open? No, we haven't cut that one for 10 years. That's like ding, ding, ding for me, right?
Right. Oh, yeah.
And
That's going to be exciting when you hear that.
Right. Right. Because now I know horses can't get in there, llamas can't get in there. The only thing that get in there is goats. And so there is a ton of that. Because remember, when they let the forest burn after Yellowstone, we now have tons of woods in the West that are full of deadfall, and deadfall are the ultimate ruiners of trails because they have to be chainsawed. And in the wilderness, they have to be cut with a crosscut saw, and they can't keep up. They just can't do it.
Right. Too much.
So for me, it's all about access, less about strategy. Of course, I'm going to set up. I'm going to hunt with my binoculars. There's 100 different guys that talk about that, but I am definitely a proponent of big optics. I'm a big proponent of looking over huge, ridiculously huge miles of country with my binos. Then I start using my feet.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to glass.
That's a great perspective. I think it's often overlooked. It's, go where the other hunters can't get, and chances are you'll have a much higher success rate, even if you're, doing it DIY. That just seems to be a better formula to me.
Yeah. No question. And guys got to remember, almost always those types of areas are going to be low density deer. So you're going to go hunt hard to spot 6 deer and hope one's a stud.
Right.
And you have to have the maturity to sit behind your binos for that long to find those deer, unless, of course, you draw in a premier area. But if you're hunting public land, wilderness, Frank Church Wilderness, for example, here in Idaho, has more deserts of animals than it has animals. It has... one time I did 34 miles in the church, and I saw 7 elk, 0 deer, and 2 bighorn sheep. 4 days of scouting an area.
Wow.
34 freaking miles, 9,000 feet
right.
of game.
Right.
It was one of the hardest trips I've ever done with 0 reward. I did not see one stinking mule deer.
That's amazing. Wow. Could you take us on a hunt with you? Like, think of a memorable hunt that you went on. Maybe it's the 208 buck that you went on, and kind of bring it all together with the goats and your hunting expertise, and kind of walk us through how it all played out.
Trying to think what kind of was the, actually one of the neatest hunts I had with the goats was with a client.
Okay.
So I had a client with me, and he was from Georgia. Never really been in the mountains of the West. Super kind, cool, quiet-spoken guy, and I took him into one of my brushiest, wolf-infested hellholes I have. And we were sleeping on bulls, and so when you sleep on bulls, it means you're working into elk, and then in the evening when you're done, you just pull back a little bit into the drainage behind you. You find some water and you set up a tent. I mean, wherever you can find a flat spot to stay that night, you roll out camp, you make your dinner, you get up the next morning, you make your breakfast, and you tear your whole camp down, and you go after bulls again. So you never have to lose or gain elevation. It's a killer strategy, but it's tons of work of setting up and tearing down and loading goats and doing all that stuff. But man, you save yourself those 1,500-foot pulls in the morning and the evening, and it's really nice. So we were just in brushy hell. And I remember telling, like I tell all my clients, the number one thing that people forget to do when the first bull comes in, I tell them also, remember, I've shot a ton of them myself, but I know I know how to kill stuff when I got poo in my pants. You've just never been there before. So just remember, your brain's going to shut off. The only thing I want you to remember is draw your bow before he hits the window. Yep. It's the number one mistake people make, is not being at full draw. Elk looks at him at 13 yards and then they're done. He blows out, no shot. So that exact scenario played out. We had an elk come into 13 yards. We had been working hard for 2 days, had barely heard any elk. He comes in, doesn't come to full draw. He goes. We have this huge disappointment. We're on day 4 later. So now we've only had one bull in range in 4 hard days of hunting. Guy's tired. I'm tired. We roll in and we take a midday nap. I think I hear a bull bugle in the distance. So we work that way at 4 o'clock in the afternoon for the evening setup. Pull in there. Goats are with us. And I'm kind of eyeballing and literally, like, I'm a big believer in God. God plays a very important role in my life. And I think he plays an important role in all of my life, including where I set up, because I ask him for his help. And so I had rejected and accepted probably 20 different setup spots on our walk in, going, right here, nah, right here, nah, right here. Anyway, we finally find a spot that I feel good about setting up. And I set up. The goats are with me. He's out front like 30 yards. I'm calling from behind. And I'm just kind of getting comfortable, just getting ready to set up. And 2 of the goats roll over and start rubbing the alders next to me. And they rub just like another big game animal. They'll rake their horns and they'll clack, and they do lots of, clacking with each other and horning each other. And they're just doing their goat thing. I'm just getting ready to call, and no, I mean, it is like somebody lit a fire under a monster like 70 yards from us. One of the deepest, most gravelly, roaring bull elk I've ever heard. I barely had a high tone. It was mostly just a roar. And I hadn't made a noise yet. He was literally responding to the goats in the brush. Wow. And so I get saucer-eyed. My client looks back at me, and literally, I think he doesn't know it's an elk. He almost got up. I think he thought it was a monster. And I'm like, he's right there. Just get ready. I'm giving him the motion, get ready to draw your bow. And so I actually really consider, should I even call? This bull is acting like he's probably on his way. He was probably in his bed. We just set up 70 yards above him. Let's see what happens. And so the bull did exactly what he thought. He started circling us downwind. And so that ended up being the only reason I even made a call, is that I repositioned to the hunter left to pull that bull back across in front of him, and made one cow call. And he was already on his way. It just adjusted his path. But that bull came into 40 yards, client stuck him, and it was just this really, really amazing experience where I just didn't think it was possible. I didn't think the goats and their elk noise could call in a bull that would actually bugle and respond and be coming in like, why are you further away than I thought you were? And what's that bull doing up there next to you? It was the coolest thing. It was like a fly on the wall experience of being a part of the elk herd unintentionally. And that's the part of the story that gave wonder. And the other part is that guy just never forgot. It was an amazing experience. We heard wolves. We called the wolves. We found elk where, we were lucky to find them late in the season. And that was a big ass bull. So it was just super cool.
What a great story. That is awesome. Just to know that your goats were not just helping you carry stuff, but they were assisting you in the hunt.
I know, right? Yeah, it was cool.
That is awesome. I have this little exercise I like to do called 10 rapid fire questions just to kind of see what your personality is like. Would you mind going through that exercise with me?
No, of course.
All right. What's your number one hunting tip of all time?
Control the wind or know the wind. I am a puffer bottle maniac. I go through 3 or 4 seasons. I always know where the wind is.
Gotcha. All right. Very good. We sometimes leave these things at home or at base camp or in the truck, and it drives us crazy if we don't have it with us. What's that one thing for you?
Binoculars.
Absolutely.
I feel naked without them.
Yep. What's your biggest pet peeve in life?
In life?
In life.
Laziness.
Laziness. Yep. I can totally appreciate that. You said you're 40-something. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm 49.
You're 49. All right. You and I are the same age. What would you tell the 16-year-old Marc Warnke, knowing what you know today about life?
What other people think of you is none of your business.
I like that a lot. I like that very much. You're at a hunting convention somewhere in the world, and you meet a stranger. They ask you what you do for a living. What do you tell them?
I'm a hunting consultant.
Excellent. What did you have for breakfast this morning?
I'm fasting, so nothing.
Fasting, all right. You get your own billboard on the side of a highway. It's a blank canvas. You can put anything you want on it. What would it say?
Hug a hunter.
That's a great one. If I say the word successful to you, who's the first person that pops into your head and why?
It's one of my clients, Lou.
Okay.
Yeah, he has it all. He figured out money, time, parenting, marriage. He's just a wise guy that figured it out without having to crush his face into a wall like I seem to have to do.
Gotcha. What's a typical day in your life look like?
Well, when I'm home, city life is, I send my boys off to school and I go into the office, feed the goats. I milk 2 goats a day. So chores is part of that. I work out on a daily basis. I monitor my food pretty darn closely. And so I'm always on some direction in terms of the calorie intake. And then, I usually try to work a fairly normal day. When I'm working, so keep normal office hours. Then I have a blackout time where I and my children aren't allowed to have a screen in front of us till about 8:30, and then I wind down in the evening with a little bit of boob tube, and then I read in bed.
Very nice. All right, and then what's a typical hunting day look like for you?
I'm that guy that's always up early. I'm an early rather than chancing late guy. Mm-hmm. So I'm in a headlamp on a consistent level. I'm in the critters or where I want to be before it gets light. So yep. I'm constantly hiking in the dark. And for me, typically, if I speak about muleys, I'm on my ass with binoculars on a tripod for multiple hours. And if I'm in elk, I hunt hard until it becomes no longer smart to hunt hard. And then I go home and take an elk nap. And I hunt my evening hunts really light, more in a preparation for the next morning. And I pick my battles and maintain energy. So I do not hunt elk all day, almost ever. And I do hunt mule deer almost all day because, I'm not pushing critters around with my binoculars. I'm just looking for them.
Gotcha. All right. Very good. That's the 10 rapid fire questions. Appreciate you doing that. Mark, I got to say, this has been an absolute blast. I learned an awful lot about what it's like to hunt with goats and hunting where you hunt, and have a great appreciation for what you're doing and just the physical demands that you put on your body and keep going it's mind-blowing. If we have created more questions than answers, as we often do on the show, what's the best place to look you up on social media and things of that nature?
So, yeah, I have an Instagram account. It's my full name. It's just Marc Warnke, and MarcWarnke. So I'm pretty easy to find there. My company is Top End Adventures, so TOPEND Adventures. And then if you Google anything to do with pack goats, you'll find me there as well. I have a YouTube channel. I make short films. That's where people can really kind of interact in that level. I do have a couple of people that work for me that help to kind of manage the growth and the chaos that's going on right now with that stuff. I've been in a couple documentaries recently, one on trophy hunting, another one, a reality TV show in Europe, and then I just did another documentary on death, which was super interesting, by the way. That was such an interesting thing. The Sundance Film Festival director that wanted to explore the topic of death with using hunting as like the medium for really good conversation, and it's really cool. It's one of the neatest projects I've been involved in with lately, but that one was really cool. So that stuff's starting to grow a lot. So just Marc Warnke, Top End Adventures, pack goats, anything to do with that, people will find me.
Very cool. Well, Mark, I got to say again, this has been an honor and a pleasure to have you on the show, and thanks for taking the time. And we'll be watching your progress here and all the things you do on social media. It's absolutely fascinating to me, and I think our listeners will truly appreciate it.
Super cool. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on.
How do you like that? Here you want to hunt a great spot, but you need to get in all your gear, and one of the best places and one of the best strategies is really not so much the strategy, but just getting to the right spot. As Mark described, he has devised a whole strategy using pack goats to get all the gear in, stay overnight, hunt till the hunt is done, pack out the meat, pack out whatever's left over the camp, and go back home. And I think he's right. I think it's often overlooked. A simple strategy of just getting to those spots where hunters won't go is often the key. Really blown away by Mark's abilities to do this. It's very unique. Don't see many people doing it, and certainly need the right terrain to do it in. But what a great idea. And I appreciate Mark coming on the show. Dusty, where can we find you when you're not hanging out here in the studios with me?
Shoot me an email, dusty@bigbuckregistry.com. You can look me up on Instagram and Twitter @ChasingAntler, Facebook.com/Chubby Tines Outdoors. Jay, where can the people reach out to you when you're not on the mic?
Likewise, you can shoot me an email, jay@bigbuckregistry.com, and you can visit us on Facebook, facebook.com/bigbuckregistry. We're also on Twitter, which is twitter.com/bigbuckregistry. We're also on Instagram, instagram.com/bigbuckregistry, and YouTube, which is youtube.com/bigbuckregistry. On YouTube, you can listen to all of our podcasts in their entirety. As far as videos are concerned, it's a boring video, but the audio content is there, so you can actually listen to our podcast. You can also listen to all of our live shows that we've done on Thursday nights when we do them, and we've gone back and re-interviewed a lot of our previous guests we had on the show just to put a face to a voice, let's put it that way. You can always listen to our show on other places as well, not just YouTube. We're found on Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, and as an Amazon Alexa skill. Go to Alexa and say, Alexa, enable Big Buck Registry. And if you would like to submit a buck to our page for consideration and be featured on our page in front of 250,000 diehard deer hunting fans, all you have to do is go to bigbuckregistry.com/mybuck, and all of the instructions will be right there. I think that's pretty much everywhere we're at. I think that's a wrap, Dusty.
That's a whole lot of big buck, Jay.
Sure is. I'm Jay Scott.
I'm Dusty Phillips.
And this is the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. We'll see you next week.